Welcome to the second City Council candidate interview on the Know Your Candidate BA official page. Today I'm interviewing Ward 1 Incumbent Candidate Debra Wimpee, and here's a short bio from her Broken Arrow Great Graduates induction ceremony. It reads, just about everything Debra Wimpee touches comes of roses, especially an award-winning downtown redevelopment project that's near and dear to her heart. This year's great graduate from the class of 1990 moved to BA in the 6th grade. She and her husband Glenn graduated from BAHS together, and their 3 children have followed in their parents' footsteps. In 2009, Wimpee launched what was destined to become a diverse business resume when she opened a boutique store on Main Street. That experience, she says, opened her eyes to the potential of what then was a struggling area and kindled within her a flame that made it virtually impossible not to take a hand in rebuilding the Rose District. During the 4 years she owned and operated her store, Wimpee got involved in the Broken Arrow Chamber of Commerce and served on that organization's board of directors. She continues to serve as an advisory board member of the BA Salvation Army. She created the Turn BA Pink, a cancer awareness program designed as a tribute to her late mother-in-law, Ruth Wimpee. That undertaking was followed by a dazzling array of highly successful special events, including the Shamrock Rose Festival, Street Eats on Main, Summer Solstice, Cinco de la Rosa, holiday pop-up shops, and Red, White, and Brew. Many people don't realize Wimpee has a management company through which she oversees 2 commercial real estate enterprises. What is well known is her election to the City Council in 2017 and her use of the platform to expand on an earlier venture called BA Buzz to spotlight all the good things she believes people need to know about Broken Arrow. In recognition of her multitude of accomplishments, Wimpee received Tulsa 40 Under 40 Award and was named Retailer of the Year by the Chamber of Commerce. A Rotarian and active member of the church at Battle Creek, she has also been named a Paul Harris Fellow, received a Community Organization Best of Broken Arrow Award, Community Advocate Award for 2020 from the Daughters of the Revolution, finalist for Oklahoma Municipal League's Women in Municipal Government Woman of the Year in 2019, and was honored with a Beacon Award for philanthropy and volunteerism. City Manager Michael Spurgeon calls her Broken Arrow's best cheerleader because of her devotion and tireless efforts on behalf of the city. It sounds like you have a pretty impressive resume.
I've been busy.
You've been definitely.
Well, I'm not sure if people know that Debra means worker bee. So
Oh, I didn't even know that. Wow.
that's where the buzz comes in. Yeah.
Oh, it all makes sense now.
It does. See, it just comes right together.
So I'm going to start with the questions.
Okay.
And this first section is called Get to Know Debra.
Yes.
So number 1, who is your idol and why?
Well, by definition, an idol is someone who is ideal, right? So the only person that would be Jesus. So if that's what you're asking, that's who I idolize. But if it's a human, like an earthly person, probably the great communicator, aka President Ronald Reagan. I loved how he drew people together. He was so good at that. And when he became president, that was it was almost like people were proud to be Americans again. And so I've always loved that, and his relationship and marriage with Nancy as well. If you haven't read the Love You Letters to Nancy book that he's written, it's pretty amazing. So
I haven't. I'll definitely look into that though. So
yeah.
And then if you could have lunch with anybody, dead or alive, who would it be and why?
My grandma, Zelda. So she died when I was in my early 20s. And so my 2 older kiddos never got to meet her. But I spent a lot of time in the summers with her. And she was one of those people who was always cooking, and people were coming in and out of the house all the time. And we would sit and play cards. And she's a little Cajun. I'm Cajun. So I would love to be able to just sit down and have lunch with her. That would be great.
Yeah. And then since you are a past business owner, like I said, you had the boutique on Main Street. What has this past of owning a business taught you about leadership?
Well, really getting involved in the community. So when I started my store, that's when I actually got involved in the chamber, because that's where you want to go to get plugged into your community if you're a business owner. So that was a great experience. I was able to go on, I ended up being on the board of directors. I think that was said in my bio, but we did really great things like going on best practice trips to other cities to see kind of cool stuff that they were doing, and find different things that we could bring back to our city. And it was fun being a retailer on Main Street. This was before the Rose District. So if you can
Mhm.
imagine, Main Street used to be where you would just go to the post office or whatever.
Mhm.
You didn't do a lot there, but it was neat to be able to be there at a time when social media was just coming on board, and I've always been very involved in that socially.
Mhm.
And it was neat to be able to create after our events to help businesses grow and bring people down to Main Street even before it was the Rose District. So um, owning a business, getting plugged in, going through all the education classes and stuff like that, that's been a real help for me.
Mhm. And then I think I read your bio. I read your bio on the city council website, and I think you talked about this, but I'm not sure. Who or what inspired you to open your business?
I actually, it wasn't a person. I
Mhm.
tend to do a lot of things like I think of something or I see somebody's doing something in another city and I think, oh, why don't we have that? We need to do this. And that was basically how the store came up. I had a lot of friends that had small businesses that would do a lot of trade shows or craft shows. And it just became this thing. It's like kind of like the market in Tulsa, but theirs was
Mhm.
all little booths, like little, here's your 10 by 10
Oh,
square booth
mhm.
with walls, right? Well, the
Yeah.
store that I opened was a wide open concept. So it looks like a retail store, except for
Mhm.
it had multiple businesses. So I started out with 800 square feet. And then I moved it within a year onto Main Street, and we had, I think, a little over 40 different vendors that were in there. But
Oh, wow.
um, yeah, so it what it did was it
Mhm.
helped them because they weren't able to open a brick and mortar, right? So they didn't
Right.
have the means to do that or could work that every day. So with
Mhm.
it being in my store, I could sell their product and promote them and market them, and so their business thrived as
Mhm.
well as, the retail store
Right.
on Main Street. So
Right. Yeah, that's cool. It sounds a little bit like Jade on Main,
yeah,
a little bit.
yeah, and so you know that concept, and that's
Mhm.
your squared walls that I was thinking of. But if you
Oh,
can
okay.
imagine, yeah, so where my store just really looked like a retail store, you didn't
Mhm.
necessarily know that that's a different vendor from, from each other.
Oh, uh-huh.
We kind of set it up where it looked
Yeah.
differently.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's a cool idea. And
thanks.
then these are, I like to call them the main questions, I guess. So, if reelected, what are your main plans for the city?
So we've got um, we just passed a historic geo bond, general obligation bond in
Mhm.
2018, $110 million of really great stuff that's going to be coming down the pipeline. So obviously, it's kind of that's a answer that everybody always says. I want to see these things come to
Mhm.
fruition, right? But really, in my ward, especially stormwater, we have major issues with Adams Creek in Ward One.
Mhm.
Every time it rains, it's scary. So even to think about development in Ward One, we have to be careful with that. So I'd really love to be able to continue the talks and find a way to manage our stormwater, and whether that's a new stormwater plant, whatever that may be. But just I'd really love to see that discussion come to actually happen, and we find a solution to our
Mhm.
stormwater issues. We've got a little over 50% of our city that's grown, and we've still got half of it to go and develop it, and so that's a
Mhm.
lot of people we could be bringing on board, and we need to make sure we have the capacity to be able to do that. So it would be great to be able to say I was able to be a part of that going forward.
Right. And then a little bit, I guess, similar question is, if you received a $1 million grant to use for the city any way you wanted, what would you do with it and why?
You know what I've learned as a city councilor,
Mhm.
$1 million doesn't go very far.
Yeah.
So and in some ways you're like, oh, that would be great, but
Yeah.
in a city our size especially. But one of the things I probably would do is
Mhm.
um, there were a lot of really great ideas that when we were doing that general obligation bond in
Mhm.
2018 that didn't make the cut, and it would be really cool to look at some of those things that didn't make the cut and be able to just bless, like if it was an organization that was wanting to do the rose garden or whatever it was, just
Mm,
to
mhm.
bless them because they worked so hard on fundraising to try to make that happen, and then it didn't make the cut in
Right.
the bond issue. So it was it would be something like that, just to give back
Mhm.
to the community.
And then how do you believe that your career as a business owner, uh, current and past, has helped you with your city council duties?
Well, with my day job, which most people don't realize what I even do, I do a lot of
Mhm,
stuff. And so they're like, oh, you have like a real job? I have been managing a commercial real estate organization for, it'll be 13 years in May. And we do all the legislative lobbying for commercial real estate issues. So,
mhm,
um, I go to DC every year for a legislative retreat. So I've been able to, over the last 13 years, be able to build relationships with our legislators at a federal level as well as a state level.
mhm,
And one of the things that I have learned during this first term is the people who govern closest to the people are the most
mhm,
effective.
mhm.
Not only that, we get the phone calls, we get the, I
Right.
get it, whether it's a pothole or a
Mhm,
stoplight or water, broken water line or something. We can fix those things so quickly and we can be effective. But it's also so important to have the relationships that I have with all of our legislators. Like I have the endorsement of all of the legislators for the most, well, I think maybe there's one that I haven't gotten yet, but not just in our
mhm.
Broken Arrow, but even outside of Broken Arrow, I've got those
Wow.
endorsements. But it's important to have
Mhm.
those relationships because I need to be
Definitely.
able, they need to be able to trust someone at a local level when
Mhm,
there's bills coming in because all they hear are from lobbyists and special interest groups like you need to do this, and those people don't have our citizens best interest at
right.
hand, right? They're thinking financial gain. So it's really important to have those relationships so that we can, when there's a bill coming down, we have a thing called Oklahoma Municipal League, and they,
Mhm,
if we haven't caught the bill, they definitely are always on the lookout and they'll send us information saying we need to look at this bill, and then that way I can reach out or all of us can reach out or whatever,
mhm,
and be able to just say, hey, this is how it's going to affect us positively or negatively, and I'm just asking for you to vote no or yes depending on what it is.
mhm.
And I when I did get elected, that was one thing that I actually used during my campaign because there had never been another candidate or a counselor that had that type of relationship with so many
Mhm.
local legislators. So that's one of my strengths on
Yeah,
that.
yeah. One of the things you said about, I think it was the people who is something about being closest to the people you
Right.
govern, kind of thing,
Yeah.
reminded me of something Joy Hoffmeister said because I'm on her student advisory board,
Oh,
and
yeah.
on the application it said, "I believe that we need to have the student advisory board because the people who know the students are the students."
That's right. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
And that's why it's so important to be involved in the community as well, because that way you
Mhm,
are just like you're involved, at your
mhm,
student level and people know you. And that's the same thing. You just have to be involved. It's so important.
mhm.
Yeah.
And then this next section is called South BA Focus because South Broken Arrow is a hot topic right now with all
Okay.
the New Orleans Square group and everything going on.
Sure.
What are your overall plans just to revitalize South Broken Arrow?
Okay. So one of the things that I think I mean, we have grown so rapidly in Broken Arrow.
Hmm.
A lot of people do not realize that South Broken Arrow used to be the happening place. So when I was in high school in
Hmm.
1990, that's where it was. That's what was
Hmm.
happening. We didn't have Bass Pro Shop. We didn't have, north side of Broken Arrow.
Right.
And so um over this last 4 years during my
Hmm.
term, we've been able to put a real focus on that. And we hired a consultant. We
Hmm.
did an overlay plan. So we know what it is that we're looking for, right? Like we know what it is that we want to create there. A
Right.
lot of times people don't realize we've got almost 90 different businesses in those four corners.
Wow.
And most people are thinking like, oh, I want a Chick-fil-A there, or I want this, or I want
Hmm.
that, but they don't realize how many restaurants and retailers that we have, or service industries that we have
Right.
right there that we really need to be supporting. And sometimes they don't support it because they don't go over there because they think what they're looking for isn't there. But
Hmm.
to continue, we set up a citizens committee, and they are all working with all the different merchants that are or in the New Orleans Square
Hmm.
currently. We're in the process of rebranding it, um, and we'll, I don't know if you've seen the tactical urbanism
Hmm.
projects. Okay, so some people are like, what? You put a piano on the corner, and may not have thought that was like cool or whatever, but you know what it did? It created a buzz, and Do you
Mhm.
like what I did there? But it did. So the news came out and did stories on it. Whether people were
Mhm.
talking about it negatively or positively, people were talking about it, right? They were
Right.
hashtagging it. They were going out and taking pictures and posting about it.
Mhm.
So where the plan is to do that once a quarter. So right now we've got the hearts up there that you can go
Mhm.
take pictures with.
Yeah.
We've got events that are lined up to be out there just to draw attention, outside events, so you can do it safely.
Mhm.
um, we've got new owners. So that's one of the things too. A lot of times people don't realize that these are out of town owners of these strip malls that are basically just investment pieces. They've got
Mhm.
whoever's in there and they're perfectly fine with whoever's in there because they're getting their bills paid, right? They get their
Right.
rent and everything's fine. But in this last year, even during COVID, which is surprising, we had someone purchase a section of that strip mall over there from the
Mhm.
movie theater over to Ross drugs or
Mm.
Ross
Mhm.
clothing store.
Yeah.
And Robbie has come in and I don't know if you've noticed, but he's painted it. He's put up like stone flower planters and stuff like that, and really just kind of brought it, up, kind of
Right.
modernized it for the most part. And when you have out of town investors that aren't here, they don't live here, they're not seeing it, um,
Mhm.
get all old and decrepit and they don't care because it's just a tax write-off for the most part.
Mhm.
It makes it hard to do anything with, right? Well, you get a
Right.
new owner in here and he starts making it lively and fresh again. He's getting
Mhm.
new tenants in there. And then you look across the street and where El Chico is, he's
Yeah.
painting.
Oh, that was
So
him?
yeah,
Oh,
so
I was gonna say, yeah. That area looks so nice now with
yeah,
it all
so
painted.
now it's kind of just it takes time. That's the other thing. I think
Mhm.
people think like, oh, we got a committee, okay, great, so when's it going to be alive, and
Right.
that's just not how it works. You have to put a plan in motion, and Bass Pro, it took what, 10 plus years to get it to be thriving, right? So
Mhm.
we've been now working on this a little over, well, I think we're going on a second year now, but one of those years was COVID. So it's
Yeah.
like, but we were still getting stuff done even during
Mhm.
a world pandemic. So
Yeah.
I know it will come back to life. We just have to be patient and we
Mhm.
all need to do our part and pitch in and go and actually support those businesses that are there currently so they can thrive during all of
Right.
this. So,
Right.
yeah.
Well, you pretty much answered all those questions that I had lined up for that section, so that's good. So we can just move on to the questions from Broken Arrow citizens.
Okay.
So this one comes from citizen named Harvant. She wants to know if you are reelected as city councilor, what are your objectives for improving a BA? In other words, what do you want to accomplish that you have not already?
Okay, so that I think I kind of answered that
Yeah.
earlier, but
Mhm.
um, we've got we've got a lot of infrastructure that we've got to improve. So there
Right.
are each the roads have a thing called a PCI, and
Mhm.
basically you want to keep that within a certain number, and which means like you don't want it to get below a certain number, or you have to
Mhm.
totally redo the streets. And
Mhm.
so we've got so much work going on streets already, with plus widening. Again, we're only
Right.
50% basically developed in our city. So we have to be forward thinking about what areas of town that could explode. Um,
Mhm.
South BA, we had over, I think it was 850 housing permits in South BA,
Oh,
which is
wow.
really important.
Mhm.
Yeah. And so that's what you need to bring development in South BA. You have to have foot traffic and daytime traffic. That's another thing I think
Mhm.
people don't realize. I would love to see more blue collar, white collar jobs in South Broken Arrow, because that's your daytime traffic.
Mhm.
83% of our citizens go to Tulsa or surrounding areas to work. They don't work here. So they get
Mhm.
up in the morning, they leave our city, right? They go and they work all day, they buy lunch, they may buy dinner while they're there. They may even grocery shop if they're on the
Mhm.
south side, they may want to go to Sprouts, so they'll go to Bigsby, which they're paying more
Yeah.
taxes, by the way, because they have higher taxes. And that tax
Mhm.
money, because the state of Oklahoma runs on sales tax revenue, is going to go to Bigsby Fire and police and their streets. So it's
Mhm.
so important to educate our citizens, which I've been, even before I was a counselor, as a retail store owner generating
Mhm.
sales tax revenue, that was one of the things that was really important to me, is to kind of just explain to people how important it is to stay in your city. You want the city to thrive. You want the city to be hometown and
Mhm.
have that family feeling and be
Right.
safe. We are the 11th, safest city. Well, that takes sales tax dollars. So if you're
Mhm.
going out of our city and spending your money because it's not convenient to go to the north side to go to Sprouts, then you're taking away from the funding that actually runs our city. So,
Mhm.
so just continuing to educate the community, continuing to get our streets and our infrastructure like where they need to be for us to continue to grow and develop.
Great. And then this one is from Brandy. It's
Okay.
she wrote a lot, so I kind of split it up into chunks.
Okay.
So the first one is, why did you feel the pull to run?
Well, let's see. So in 2017, prior to
Mhm,
that, because I was always doing legislative lobbying for my actual my daytime job, my profession, um, I would help grassroots wise different campaigns. I would do public, the public relations for them when I found a
mhm,
candidate that I really thought was going to make a difference in our community and our state. And people would always say, "When are you going to run?" And I'd say, "Oh, I'm not. I'm fine being, helping and being behind the scenes."
mhm,
Um, and then my husband would always say, "Oh, she's not. We've got a young one at home she's now a junior, but
mhm,
he's like saying, I don't want to be a single dad, so it's fine. She does enough for free. She doesn't need to do that." But in 2017, I was in the middle of planning my annual Shamrock the Rose event, which is what I do as a benefit for Soldiers Wish.
mhm,
And it wasn't coming together. It was like at the end of January and the funding wasn't coming together. So basically, if I don't get enough sponsors to put it on, it's coming out of my pocket, right? And
mhm,
my husband
mhm.
doesn't want to pay for that.
Yeah.
So I don't think anybody wants to pay for that. But so it was just really frustrating. And my husband actually said, I have to tell you, I've been praying about this for about 2 weeks. And he said,
Mhm,
I feel like God has told me you're not supposed to do Shamrock this year. And I was like, well, I wish he would have told me because I've been working on it for 8 months. But
mhm,
I kind of got bummed out when he said that because I said, well, that's like one of my major ways that I give back to my veterans and I give back to the community. Um, so now what, right? So I get kind of
mhm,
upset and bummed about it. And he said, well, that's the other thing. He goes, I kind of feel like God is saying that you're supposed to run for city council. So this is
mhm.
the end of January 2017. I hadn't even thought about running for city council.
Right.
Um, the filing was the first week in February and election is April, first week in
Mhm,
April. So there was no planning, like no anything.
right.
But we talked about it when I got home that night and called up some people that, that are trusted that's still on my campaign team. And we
Mhm,
talked about it and they were like, Deb, you got to do it. Let's do it. So that's why I decided to run the first time around.
mhm,
And I I love people. That's my thing. I love being a light. I love being a connector. And I have enjoyed this last 4 years just getting to know even more people, being from Broken Arrow, like, you've grown up here,
yeah.
so well,
Mhm,
I grew up here. I mean, I grew up when I could walk from Central on Main, which was my middle school, by the way, and walk down
mhm,
to Petrick Drugs, which is where Franklin's and Toast is now.
mhm,
And I love that this place is still just, I mean, to me, it feels like that small town, even though we're kind of a big city now and we're kind
mhm,
of a big deal. But
yeah.
I love that we can still feel small town and have, parades. And when something special, when someone wins a state champion, we can get our police and fire out and people line the street and welcome them home and celebrate their victories and stuff. So I just love being a part of that and being able to make a difference each day in the role that I have. Now, if I
Mhm,
don't get reelected, I will still continue to do the things that I'm doing.
yeah.
I'll still work with our legislators. I'll still, if there's a need, if a citizen needs something, they can text, they can call, they can reach out on
Mhm,
Facebook, and I'll still help in any way that I can. So
mhm,
I love serving and I love people. So that's why I continue on.
yeah. And then the next part is, what are your top 3 things you love about Broken Arrow?
That it feels like a small town. It's like the
Mhm,
biggest small, or like the biggest
yeah.
small town kind of thing. And I hope it always stays that way. I
Mhm,
love that anywhere I go, I see either classmates of mine, or I see
mhm,
their siblings, or I see their parents, or I see their kids, and
mhm,
so I love that. And then I love that people see this as like so many people that work outside of here want to live in Broken Arrow because of everything
mhm,
that we have to offer. The safest city, and I mean our public safety department is top notch. Fire and
mhm,
police are extraordinary. I love that we can run a city on having probably, gosh, we probably need double the amount of police officers on an average, but
Mhm.
we can run and still be the safest city on what we have because we have such a great leadership team in place. So I love our public safety, and then and of course the people in Broken Arrow. So
Mhm. Yeah.
that was several, but there you go.
And then what is a quality about your opponents that you admire?
Um, which- Honestly, just being ready to step up and get involved in our community.
Mhm.
Um, of course, I didn't know any of them, and what I would
Right.
have loved is if any of them would have just, reached out and said, "Hey, I'd love to sit down and talk." When I ran, I actually that's what I did. I reached out to our guy,
Mhm.
but I love the fact that they have decided, like, you know what, I live here. I want to get involved.
Mhm.
I want to take a run at this. So I think that's great.
Yeah. And then this next question is from a citizen named Gary,
Okay.
and he wants to know, are there conflict of interest regulations for city councilors? And if so, what do they consist of? And is there enforcement, or is it just up to the council person to determine if he or she has a conflict of interest? And if
Yes.
there
So
is, could you give an example?
oh, okay. So yes, it is up to the counselors to
Mhm.
decide if they have a conflict of interest or not. So for instance, I don't know that I've had to recuse myself on anything
Mhm.
in my entire first term. Um, so which would mean I haven't had a conflict of interest.
Right.
But for instance, our uh, Counselor Gillespie
Mhm.
goes to church at Church on the Move, and we were voting on them going into a new building. And so she just felt ethically she should remove herself from that vote because
Mhm.
obviously,
Right.
that's where she attends and she's going to
Right.
vote yes, right? So
Mhm.
so she just felt like, and that's her character, like she should just do that.
Mhm.
Um and in my opinion, I think she could have voted because that wasn't, I mean, that wasn't like a that really wasn't
Mhm.
an ethic thing, in my opinion. That was,
Mhm.
she just wanted to make sure that everything was on the up and
Right.
up.
Right. Right.
Um, I think one of our counselors, he's an attorney, and sometimes he does things for HOAs. And if it's one of his clients, obviously he's going to
Mhm.
step out. And same thing with our mayor. He's a construction consultant, and there are developments that come through, and so he steps out and recuses himself.
Oh,
So
okay.
it's definitely
Okay.
on the council
Mhm.
to decide when they should be able to, or when they should recuse themselves for
Hmm.
conflict of interest.
All right. And then the next two questions are from the same person.
Okay.
Her name is Debbie, and she says, "What do you bring to the city council that other current city councilors and the other candidates for your ward do not?"
Okay. And I probably, one of the main thing is my
Mhm.
relationships with the legislators,
Yeah.
which I did touch on that, but it's
Mhm.
just so important because when these bills come through, if they are hearing from special interest groups all day long and they're not hearing from their local municipalities, they could make a decision that they don't realize is affecting them. So there's been times that like an industry in our city,
Mhm.
um, there was a bill coming up, and that industry person contacted me to see if there was anything I could do because a certain legislator was putting this bill up. And
Mhm.
when I contacted them and I said, have you even talked to them about this? And they
Mhm.
were like, well, no, but so and so talked to me. And I said, oh my gosh, you can't put a
Yeah.
bill up about an industry and not even go and talk to that industry to see how it's going to affect them. So just having that communication with them constantly,
Mhm.
um, and they can tell you, it might be late night Saturday that I find out about something, and I'll shoot them a text and say, hey, you're voting on this Monday, and this is what you need to look at.
Mhm.
So I
And
think that's
then
definitely,
mhm.
that's a, again,
Yeah. And then her other
sorry,
question,
go ahead.
oh, you're good. Her other question is, what are your thoughts on transparency of the city council and the city in general to BA residents?
Yeah. So when I obviously, well, not ever, obviously, you guys may not know, I run the BA Buzz page, and I
Mhm.
started that almost 8 years ago because we just didn't have something like that socially. I would do that kind of stuff on my own personal page. I just say, hey, I just came from this. Did you know this was happening? Or, did you know this
Mhm.
event's happening? Report it. I started that page because I wanted people to be aware of what's going on in our city. I mean, just like the election, people don't to this day, which blows my mind, and I've been talking about them for 4 years, they don't know that the whole city votes. They don't
Mhm.
know that we don't elect our mayor or vice mayor. Some people don't know who any of the counselors are. And when I
Right.
was running, people didn't even, uh, the main thing I heard was that people would say, I don't know who they are, and it doesn't matter anyway, because they have their own agenda, for our
Mhm.
city. So they're not going to listen. And I hated that because I thought,
Mhm.
how is this? Why has this been happening this long? Um, but with our new city manager, I say new, he's been in for 5 years now, but he's been such an integral part to getting information out. He created all these like videos, the
Mhm.
take five videos and such that just kind of videos so that citizens could be aware of things that are going on in our city. Um,
Mhm.
he may be a little upset that my buzz page has the largest reach in the city, but he loves that. It's a great
Mhm.
partnership,
Yeah.
that I make sure that I just get whatever information people need out there. And same with my council page. And I know Councilor Gillespie does a great job too of getting stuff out there.
Mhm.
Donna Wallace does a great job, on South
Yeah.
VA Alert. So she's always
Uh-huh.
sharing stuff, but it's
Mhm.
just really important. We don't have a newspaper anymore, right?
Mhm.
So you where do you get your news from then, right? Like
Right.
locally anyway. So I think it's so important to just make sure that everybody has a clear understanding of bond issues that are coming up, or when there's an issue in the city. It's just so
Mhm.
important that people are actually paying attention. I would love for more people to start coming either to our council meetings or at least watching them online, so
Mhm.
that they can kind of see what it takes to run a city and kind of understand a little more about what goes on as local government. Um, and so I just think it's so important to just have people know what's going on. So that's why I just make sure
Right.
that I put as much as I can out there. So
Yeah. This is a personal question real quick.
okay.
Do you know about the how many residents we have in Broken Arrow?
So that's a funny thing. Okay, so
Mhm.
for the longest time, we've been saying, oh, it's about 115. Well, when the COVID started, we've
Mhm.
realized that they go by zip code counts. Well, some people live in a zip code that is actually, Tulsa, or it's
Right.
outside the city limits. And so that number is about 135. So if you talk about zip
Mhm.
codes, it's about 135. Of course, the census that we just took probably won't go into effect until spring of 22, I believe is what they were saying.
Mhm.
Normally, I guess we would have already kind of found out what that was, but they're saying probably September of this year is when we'll find out what the actual number is that
Mhm.
came from that. But to redistrict, or if the possibility of redistricting would be in the spring of 22. So
Wow.
between 115 and
Mhm.
135 for the
That's
most part.
crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, you were talking about just the sheer amount of people that didn't know about city council elections or anything. And I was looking at the numbers for I think it was this past election, and about only like
30.
3,700 people voted.
Yep.
And
We
so
have
it's
we
just
have about
crazy.
67,000 registered voters in Broken Arrow.
Oh
And
wow.
yeah.
That is crazy.
Yeah, that's why it's so cool that you're doing this, because your age
Mhm.
group, I mean, it is time for you guys to start realizing, because you're adults now when
Yeah.
you're 18. So it's time to just, get more involved and find out about your local
Mhm.
government. It's so important that the local positions are great people who have the heart of the city for their city and for their citizens, because if anyone's in there with their own agenda, that's not the best for the city. So
Right.
you have to definitely make sure that we're putting the right people in there, and the way to start that is by young people
Mhm.
educating themselves. So kudos to you, Aiden, for
Thank
getting
you.
involved in the state PTA. That's amazing. And then also for creating this Know Your Candidate and helping us get younger people out there to vote.
Mhm.
Yep.
And then this last question comes from Jen, and she wants to know what's more important right now, building new, you kind of touched on this, building new homes in commercial space, or rehabbing, expanding, better utilizing our existing homes and storefronts.
Okay. So gosh, that's kind of a twofold. They're both
Mhm.
they're both important, because like for instance the research building, if you aren't aware, it's a pretty rundown building. So
Yeah.
um there's
Mhm.
a part of me that's like, why would anyone want to buy that, and renovate it? Why wouldn't you just tear it down?
Mhm.
So each situation is kind of its own its own issue. So you have to look at it piece by piece. And I'm not sure where her question is coming from. It could be like historic buildings. You
Mhm,
know, does she think that it would be better? Is she asking, do we think it's better to renovate historic buildings? I
mhm.
love keeping historic stuff. Um, but then you also look at, I love renovating old things and making them kind of new. But then when you look at houses, we recently, I think it was last year, I believe, we took down the president of, the original high school in Broken Arrow, his original house. Um,
Mhm.
and people got really upset about that. Um, but if you saw pictures inside, it looked like a cross between like a natural disaster and a hoarders episode.
Oh
It
my gosh.
was, ceilings falling in, water
Mhm.
damage galore, nothing. I don't even know how it was standing when you saw the
Yeah.
pictures. And there was just stuff packed in there.
Mhm.
So obviously, I mean, how do you renovate that house? But people,
Yeah.
I mean, but it was upsetting. I mean, like I was even upset because I thought,
Mhm.
it's a piece of history. Luckily, we should have. I'm hoping that we did, but we were able to get it on the historic roll, so it is documented. We do that for sure. The museum in Broken Arrow does a fantastic job about
Mhm.
that. So,
Yeah.
but from an economic development perspective, we can utilize both, and so that's kind of a hard question. It really is
Mhm.
just dependent on the area, town, and what it is that we're looking
Right.
for. So,
Yeah. I know that's one of my grandma and I's favorite thing is going on Main Street and looking at all the new old looking houses.
yeah, yeah,
So that's always
yeah.
fun. Mhm. And so that was our final question. So
Okay,
I just wanted to say thank you everyone for watching. Um, I'm so glad you could join me today. Debra Wimpee, Ward 1 incumbent candidate. I wanted to wish you good luck on your campaign, and I hope everyone has a great rest of their night.
thank
See
you.
ya.
Thanks for having me, and thanks again for creating this, Aiden.
Thank you.
Good night.